I never thought the proudest moment of my life would become the catalyst for my complete and utter destruction. But that's exactly what happened the night I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. My name is Michael, and for 23 years I believed I was building something beautiful. I believed in sacrifice. I believed that love, hard work, and dedication could create a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. I was wrong about so many things, but I was especially wrong about the people I trusted most. This story begins on what should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. My son, Brandon, had just graduated from Stanford University with honors. Stanford. Do you understand what that means for a man like me? I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 siblings, sharing clothes, sharing dreams, sharing the kind of poverty that makes you question whether dreaming is even worth it. My father worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford to send any of us to college. I watched him break himself down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but exhaustion and regret. I swore I would never let that happen to my son. From the moment Brandon was born, I had a plan. Every extra shift I worked at the manufacturing plant went into his college fund. Every promotion, every bonus. Every single dollar I could scrape together went toward one goal, giving him the opportunities I never had. My wife, Linda, she understood. Or at least, I thought she did. We lived modestly, drove old cars, took vacations at state parks instead of resorts. We told ourselves it was worth it. We told ourselves that Brandon's success would be our success. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. I sat there in the crowd, tears streaming down my face, watching my boy walk across that stage in his cap and gown. I'd spent nearly $400,000 on his education. $400,000. That was my entire life savings, my retirement fund. The small inheritance my parents left me, and a significant loan I'd taken against our house. But seeing him up there, seeing him smile, seeing him hold that diploma, I thought it was worth every penny. The celebration dinner was at an expensive restaurant near campus. Brandon had insisted, and I couldn't say no. It was his night. Linda wore a dress she'd bought on sale 3 years ago, but saved for special occasions. I wore the one good suit I owned, the same one I'd worn to my father's funeral and my wedding. We looked out of place among the other families, the ones who belonged to country clubs and discussed their summer homes in Napa Valley, but we didn't care. This was our moment too. Brandon seemed distracted throughout dinner. He kept checking his phone, smiling at messages I couldn't see. Linda noticed it too, but she just squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "He's probably excited about his future. Let him enjoy it." After dinner, Brandon said he needed to meet up with some friends for a graduation party. He hugged us both, thanked us again for everything, and promised to visit home soon before starting his new job at a prestigious tech company in San Francisco. I remember the way he hugged me. It felt routine, almost mechanical, not the embrace of a son who understood the magnitude of what his father had sacrificed. But I pushed that thought away. I was being sensitive. He was young, excited, ready to start his life. Linda and I decided to stay an extra night in the hotel near campus. We'd prepaid for it months ago, and it felt like a small luxury we deserved. The hotel was nice, nicer than anywhere we'd stayed in years. We'd grabbed a bottle of cheap wine from a convenience store and were planning to toast to Brandon's success and our own perseverance. That's when everything changed. I'd gone down to the hotel lobby around 11 o'clock to get ice from the machine. The elevator was broken, so I took the stairs. On the 3rd floor landing, I heard voices. Loud, young voices echoing up from the 2nd floor. I recognized one of them immediately. It was Brandon. I should have called out to him. I should have walked down and joined whatever conversation he was having. But something in his tone stopped me. There was a harshness to it, a mockery that I'd never heard from him before. I stood there, frozen on the landing, and listened. "I'm telling you, man, I can't wait to get out of this town and away from them," Brandon was saying. "For years of pretending to be grateful for every little thing, do you know how exhausting that is?" Another voice, one I didn't recognize, laughed. "Dude, your parents seemed nice at dinner?" "Your dad was crying during your speech." "Of course he was crying," Brandon said, and I could hear the eye roll in his voice. He thinks he's some kind of hero because he threw money at a problem. Like, congratulations, you did the bare minimum. You're supposed to provide for your kid. That's literally your job as a parent. My heart started pounding. I gripped the stair railing so hard my knuckles turned white. $400,000, though, another voice chimed in. That's not exactly bare minimum. It was a cold, dismissive sound. It's not my fault they're bad with money. My mom could have gone back to work instead of playing housewife for 20 years. They could have invested smarter, lived somewhere cheaper, made better choices. But no, they had to play the martyrs, making me feel guilty about every opportunity they gave me. Like I should spend my entire life thanking them for doing what parents are supposed to do. I felt physically sick. The stairwell started spinning. And your mom? Someone asked. She seemed sweet. She's fine, Brandon said with a shrug. I could hear in his voice. I mean, she's basically just my dad's cheerleader at this point. She gave up her entire personality to play the supportive wife role. It's kind of sad, actually. I've already told Melissa I'm never marrying someone who doesn't have their own career and ambitions. I'm not going to end up like my dad, trapped by obligation and resentment. Who's Melissa? The first friend asked. The girl I've been seeing for 2 years, Brandon said casually. The one I'm moving in with next month in San Francisco. I haven't told my parents about her yet because, honestly, why deal with the drama? They'll want to meet her, have some awkward dinner, give me the whole "we're so proud of you" speech. I'm 23 years old. I don't need their approval anymore. I got what I needed from them in education and a trust fund when my grandparents died. After that, I'm planning to go low contact. Maybe see them on holidays if I'm not too busy. The words hit me like physical blows. Each sentence was a knife twisting deeper into my chest. That's cold, man, one of the friends said, but he was laughing. It's practical, Brandon corrected. Look, I appreciate what they did, I guess. But I didn't ask to be born. They chose to have a kid, which means they chose to take on the financial responsibility. I'm not going to spend my life feeling indebted to them for making their own choices. I'm going to live my life on my terms, with people who actually get me and don't make me feel like I owe them something every time we talk. I don't remember walking back to the hotel room. I don't remember the stairs or the hallway or unlocking the door. The next thing I was consciously aware of was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at nothing, while Linda asked me what was wrong. I told her everything. Every word, every inflection, every devastating detail. She cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears she'd shed at graduation, but deep, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. We held each other in that hotel room and mourned the child we thought we knew. We mourned the relationship we thought we had. We mourned 23 years of love that, apparently, had been completely one-sided. Linda wanted to confront him immediately. She wanted to call him, demand an explanation, make him take it back. But I stopped her, because I realized something in that moment that changed everything. Confronting him would change nothing. He would apologize, sure. He would say he was drunk, or upset, or that we misunderstood. He would do damage control, because that's what he'd been doing his whole life, managing us. Manipulating us. Performing the role of grateful son while secretly resenting every sacrifice we made. No. Confrontation wasn't the answer. If Brandon thought we were fools, if he thought we were easily manipulated, if he thought he could use us and discard us with no consequences, then I was going to show him exactly how wrong he was. I was going to give him what he claimed he wanted, freedom from obligation. But I was going to do it in a way he'd never forget. The next morning, Linda and I drove home in silence. I'd barely slept, but my mind had never been clearer. Brandon had made several critical mistakes in his arrogant little speech. He'd revealed information he shouldn't have, and he'd underestimated the man he thought he knew so well. First, I called our family lawyer. Brandon didn't know this, but my parents' will had a specific clause that I'd had modified years ago. The trust fund Brandon had so casually mentioned the one he was expecting to inherit. When my parents' estate was finally settled, wasn't guaranteed. As the executor, I had full discretion over the distribution, and the will specifically stated that beneficiaries must demonstrate respect, gratitude, and meaningful family connection, to receive their inheritance. My parents had put that clause in because they'd watched too many families destroyed by entitled children fighting over money. I documented everything. I wrote down every word of the conversation I'd overheard, with dates, times, and witnesses present. I had the lawyer prepare an official statement of disinheritance. Brandon wouldn't get a single dollar from his grandparents' estate. That was roughly $300,000 he'd been counting on to pad his new life in San Francisco. But that wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Second, I called Brandon's new employer. Not to sabotage him, I'm not that cruel, but to verify his start date and compensation package. During my conversation with their HR department, I mentioned casually we were so proud of Brandon and wanted to throw him a small celebration. Would they mind sharing any information about relocation assistance or signing bonuses? They were happy to help. Brandon's compensation package was generous: $120,000 starting salary, $30,000 signing bonus, and full relocation assistance. He didn't need us anymore. He'd said as much. So I was going to make sure he got exactly what he wanted: complete independence. Third, I went to the bank. The loan I'd taken against our house to help pay for Brandon's final 2 years at Stanford was in my name only. But Brandon had been listed as a co-signer on one of the smaller student loans, about $45,000, because it had offered a better interest rate. I'd been making the payments myself, of course, but legally he was responsible too. I stopped making payments on that particular loan. Let him deal with the consequences of his own education debt. Fourth, most importantly, I prepared for the conversation we were going to have. Because I wasn't going to let this slide quietly. I wasn't going to fade into the background of his life. I was going to make sure he understood exactly what he'd lost. 2 weeks later, Brandon called. He was chipper, excited, full of energy about his upcoming move to San Francisco. He asked if he could store some boxes at our house for a few months until he settled in. He asked if we could help him drive his stuff up to California. Of course, I said, my voice perfectly calm. Why don't you come home this weekend? Your mother and I want to talk to you about something important. I could hear the slight hesitation in his voice. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I lied. We just want to discuss some family matters before you move. It won't take long. He arrived on Saturday afternoon in a rental truck, already half-packed with his belongings. Linda had cooked his favorite meal just like she'd done 1,000 times before. We sat around the dinner table, the same table where we'd celebrated every birthday, every achievement, every milestone of his life, and made small talk. He told us about his new apartment, his new girlfriend Melissa, who he introduced as if we were meeting her for the first time, his excitement about starting his career. I let him talk. I let him perform his gratitude, his affection, his pretense of caring. And then when he finally paused, I spoke. Brandon, your mother and I need to talk to you about your inheritance. His eyes lit up. Of course they did. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Your grandparents' estate has been finalized, I continued. The trust fund they set up has reached maturity, and as executor, I need to discuss the distribution. Okay, he said slowly, trying to hide his eagerness. I slid a folder across the table. This is a legal document formally removing you as a beneficiary from the trust. You won't be receiving any inheritance. The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon stared at the folder like it was a poisonous snake. What? Dad, is this a joke? No joke, I said calmly. Your grandparents' will has a specific clause about beneficiaries demonstrating respect and meaningful family connection. Based on your recent behavior and statements, I've determined that you don't meet those criteria. His face went pale, then red. What statements? What are you talking about? I was in the hotel stairwell 2 weeks ago, I said, my voice steady, despite the rage burning in my chest. I heard every word of your conversation with your friends, every dismissive comment about your mother and me, every entitled, arrogant word about how we did the bare minimum and how you can't wait to go low contact once you've gotten everything you need from us. Brandon's expression cycled through shock, panic, and then anger. You were eavesdropping on me? I was getting ice, I corrected. You were having a loud conversation in a public stairwell. But please, tell me which part I misunderstood. The part where you called your mother sad for supporting her family? The part where you said providing for you was the bare minimum? The part where you admitted you've been pretending to be grateful for years while secretly planning to cut us out of your life? He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. You can't do this. That money was supposed to be mine. No, I said, standing to meet his gaze. That money was supposed to go to a grandchild who valued family, who understood sacrifice, who had the character and gratitude your grandparents believed in. You're not that person. You made that very clear. Linda was crying quietly, but she didn't intervene. We'd discussed this. We'd agreed. Brandon's anger turned to desperation. Dad, come on. I was drunk. I was just venting to my friends. You can't take this seriously. I'm taking it very seriously, I replied. Drunk words or sober thoughts, Brandon. You revealed exactly how you feel about us, and I believe you. So I'm giving you what you wanted. Freedom from obligation. You said you didn't ask to be born, that you didn't owe us anything for making our own choices. Well, you're absolutely right. You don't owe us anything. And we don't owe you anything either. This is insane. He shouted. You're punishing me for one conversation? I'm holding you accountable for your character, I said. There's a difference. But don't worry, you've made it very clear that you don't need us. You have a great job, a signing bonus, a girlfriend, and a whole life planned out that doesn't include your burdensome parents. You'll be fine. He tried a different approach. What about Mom? You're going to let him do this? He turned to Linda, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. Mom, please. Tell him he's being unreasonable. Linda stood up, wiped her eyes, and looked at our son with a sadness that broke my heart all over again. You called me sad, Brandon? You said I gave up my personality to be a cheerleader. Do you want to know why I stayed home all those years instead of going back to work? Because I wanted to be there for you. Every school event, every sick day, every moment you needed someone. I chose you over a career because I thought that meant something. I thought you understood that love is sacrifice. Her voice hardened. But you don't understand that, do you? You think sacrifice is weakness? You think our love is something you can use and discard. So yes, I support your father's decision completely. You want to be free of us? You're free. Brandon looked between us, realizing that his usual manipulation tactics weren't working. You're really going to do this? After everything. After everything? I repeated. Yes, there's one more thing you should know. That $40,000 student loan you co-signed? I've stopped making payments. It's your debt now. You're making good money? You can handle it. His jaw dropped. That's going to destroy my credit. Then you should probably start making payments, I suggested. You're a Stanford graduate, after all. I'm sure you can figure it out. Brandon grabbed his jacket, his face contorted with rage, and something that looked almost like fear. I can't believe you're doing this. You're supposed to be my parents. We are your parents, Linda said quietly. We loved you, raised you, gave you every opportunity we could. But being a parent doesn't mean letting yourself be used and disrespected. It doesn't mean financing the life of someone who views us as an obligation to escape from. You'll regret this, Brandon spat. When you're old and alone, don't come crying to me. I almost laughed at the irony. Brandon, you were planning to go low contact anyway. You said as much. We're just getting ahead of the curve. At least this way, we maintain our dignity. He stormed out. The rental truck roared to life in our driveway, and then he was gone. The house felt incredibly quiet. Linda and I sat back down at the table, holding hands, surrounded by the remains of the dinner she'd cooked with so much love. We cried together. Not for the son who'd driven away, but for the son we thought we'd raise, the one who apparently never existed. The next few months were the hardest of my life. Harder than growing up poor. Harder than working double shifts. Harder than anything I'd ever experienced. Because grief is complicated when the person you're mourning is still alive. It's just irreversibly changed in your eyes. Brandon tried calling a few times in the first weeks. His messages went from angry to pleading to coldly formal. He wanted to talk things through, to reach a compromise. I didn't respond. Linda did once briefly, telling him that if he wanted a relationship with us, It had to be real, not transactional, not manipulative, not based on what he could get from us. He never called back after that. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved to San Francisco with Melissa. The job was going well. He'd had to get a roommate to afford the apartment he wanted because the student loan payments were cutting into his budget. His social media showed the same curated version of his life: successful, happy, free. But here's the thing about revenge, about consequences, about holding people accountable. The satisfaction doesn't come from their suffering. It comes from reclaiming your own dignity. Linda and I had to rebuild our lives around the absence of someone who'd been central to them for 23 years. We had to redefine what success meant, what parenthood meant, what our future looked like. And slowly, painfully, we did. We used the money from my parents' trust, the money Brandon would have inherited, to pay off our house completely. No more loan, no more debt. For the first time in decades, we were financially free. Linda started taking art classes, something she'd always wanted to do, but had sacrificed for Brandon's schedule. I cut back my hours at work and started volunteering at a local community center, helping other parents navigate college financial aid. We made new friends. We traveled modestly, but meaningfully. We rediscovered who we were as individuals and as a couple, separate from our identity as Brandon's parents, and we waited, because I knew eventually reality would teach Brandon the lessons we couldn't. It took 3 years. 3 years of silence, of missed birthdays and holidays, of watching his life through the distant lens of social media. 3 years of wondering if we'd done the right thing, of second-guessing ourselves in the quiet hours of the night. And then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Dad? Brandon's voice was different, smaller, older. Brandon, I said neutrally. Can we talk? In person? About what? There was a long pause. About everything. About how wrong I was. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our city and San Francisco. Neutral ground. When Brandon walked in, I barely recognized him. Not physically, though he looked tired, thinner, but in his demeanor. The arrogance was gone. The casual confidence had been replaced with something that looked like humility. We sat across from each other, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Melissa left me, he finally said. 6 months ago. She said I was emotionally unavailable, that I didn't know how to really connect with people, that I treated relationships like transactions. He laughed bitterly. She wasn't wrong. I didn't respond. I just listened. I've been in therapy, he continued. After she left, I kind of fell apart. I realized I didn't have any real friends. Everyone I knew was either a work connection or someone I'd met through Melissa. And when things got hard, when I actually needed support, there was no one. No one except... He paused, his voice cracking. Except I'd burned the bridge to the 2 people who actually loved me unconditionally. Not unconditionally. I corrected gently. We loved you completely, but that doesn't mean accepting disrespect and manipulation. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know, God, Dad, I know. I was such an entitled asshole. I didn't understand. I didn't understand what you gave up for me until I had to start making sacrifices of my own. Working 60-hour weeks, barely affording rent, even with a roommate. Dealing with the stress and pressure and realizing that you did all of that while also raising me, while also making sure I had everything I needed. That was our choice, I said. We don't regret the sacrifice. We regret that you didn't value it. I value it now, he whispered. I value it so much it hurts. Every day I think about the things I said, the way I treated you both, and I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed I can barely function sometimes. We talked for 3 hours. He told me everything: the breakup, the loneliness, the therapy sessions where he'd had to confront exactly who he'd become and why. The therapist had helped him understand that his entitlement wasn't just about money, it was about emotional maturity, about never having had to truly struggle or fail in a way that taught him empathy. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said as the coffee shop started closing around us. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away, and I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse. Genuine growth. I can't speak for your mother, I said slowly. And I can't promise that things will go back to the way they were, because they won't. Too much has happened. But if you want to try to build something new, something real, something based on mutual respect rather than obligation, I'm willing to try. Right. He broke down completely then, sobbing in a way I hadn't seen since he was a little boy with a skinned knee. I reached across the table and held his hand, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had my son back. Not the version I'd created in my head, not the perfect grateful child I'd expected, but the real, flawed, growing person he actually was. Recovery isn't linear. Rebuilding trust is painstaking and painful. Brandon meets with us once a month now, sometimes more. He's in therapy, working on his issues. He met with Linda separately and apologized, really apologized, in a way that meant something. She's still hurt, still cautious, but she's willing to try too. He asked once about the inheritance. Whether there was any chance of revisiting that decision, I told him no. Not as punishment, but as a natural consequence. That money has given Linda and me a security and freedom we never had before, and we're using it to build our own future. If he wanted financial help, he'd have to earn it through years of demonstrated change, and even then, it would be a gift freely given, not an obligation or expectation. He accepted that. Didn't argue, didn't manipulate, just nodded and said he understood. Last month, Brandon asked if he could bring his new girlfriend to dinner. Not Melissa, someone new, someone he described as real and kind. We said yes. Linda cooked his favorite meal again, though this time with different expectations. This time, we all knew the performance was over. This was just family, complicated, damaged, but slowly healing family. At the end of the night, as they were leaving, Brandon hugged me. A real hug. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." "We're your parents," I said. "That's what we do." But this time, I knew he understood the weight of those words. The sacrifice, the love, the commitment. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe Brandon will continue to grow and change. Maybe we'll rebuild something beautiful from the wreckage. Maybe this will always be complicated and imperfect. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the greatest act of love is holding someone accountable. Sometimes letting them fail, letting them face consequences, is the only way they'll learn to truly stand on their own feet. I spent my life savings on my son's future, and one conversation did destroy it all, but it also revealed the truth I needed to see. And in a strange way, that truth set all of us free. The revenge I took wasn't about punishment. It was about dignity, about refusing to be used. About teaching a lesson that no amount of money could buy, that love without respect is meaningless, and that gratitude isn't something you perform, something you feel and demonstrate. Through how you treat the people who sacrificed for you, Brandon lost his inheritance, his safety net, his easy path forward. But in losing all of that, he found something more valuable: the humility to change, the capacity for real connection, and the understanding that the most important things in life can't be bought or taken for granted. And me. I found my self-respect again. I found that I could love my son without sacrificing my dignity. I found that sometimes the hardest parental decision is also the right one. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt taken for granted, ever questioned whether your sacrifices mattered, ever wondered if you were wrong to hold someone accountable, I hope this helps. You're not alone. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes it means walking away. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it means getting the chance to rebuild something better from the ashes. Leave a comment if this resonated with you. Share your own story if you feel comfortable. And remember, you teach people how to treat you. Don't be afraid to demand the respect you deserve, even from the people you love most.